On that rainy night in Prague, an unfamiliar door whispered, "Here, every drop is laughter through tears, and every encounter is the beginning of a new symphony." I never imagined that one day, while taking shelter from an unexpected rain on the streets of old Prague, my fate would turn so unexpectedly. That evening, the sky above the city erupted into a storm, and I, sheltering under an umbrella, hurried to find any refuge. It seemed as if even the city streets knew that I was seeking not just shelter from the downpour, but a temporary haven for my exhausted soul, weary from endless searches for warmth and understanding. And then, literally on the corner of a narrow cobblestone lane, I found myself before the massive, moss-covered door of an ancient building, left ajar by fate as if by design. I froze for a moment, astonished by this unexpected discovery. The door, as if inviting me to step into a world of untold secrets, beckoned with its mystery. From inside came a muted light and soft music, as though someone had long been expecting me. Without a second thought, I moved closer, and my hand reached out almost of its own accord to the cold metal handle. With the first raindrops pattering against the windows, I made up my mind and knocked. The sound of my gentle knock echoed down the corridor, and after a few long seconds, the door slowly swung open as if realizing the significance of my arrival. Standing on the threshold was a middle-aged man with deep, life-worn eyes that immediately conveyed both warmth and an indescribable sadness. His slightly weathered face exuded calm and care, as though he understood how much I had endured before ending up on that street. In a soft tone, he said, "Good evening, dear stranger. It seems fate has brought us together tonight." I felt my heart beat faster, and something long forgotten awakened within me. The hope that perhaps, right here, I would find the answers to the questions that had tormented me for so long. His voice was deep and calm, imbued with a mysterious strength capable of soothing even the vaguest fears. In the next moment, I stepped over the threshold of that ancient house. The interior struck me with its contrast, the strict lines of architectural details, old paintings on the walls, and cozy corners where even time seemed to stand still. The warm glow of lamps and the crackle of burning logs in the fireplace filled the room with an atmosphere of comfort that is so rare in a cold and indifferent world. Mr. Oliver, as I soon learned, was the owner of this house, a man with a wealth of experience accumulated over years of wandering and trials. He led me into the living room where, at a large wooden table, a freshly brewed cup of coffee and several buns baked according to an old family recipe were already waiting. Despite the unusual circumstances, his cordiality and attentiveness felt so natural that I, forgetting everything else, allowed myself to relax. A conversation began between us, interwoven with words of gratitude and quiet confessions. He asked me where I was from, what had brought me to this city, and despite the apparent spontaneity of my arrival, his question sounded as if he had long been searching for me, as if he had been seeking the answers to the questions of his own soul. Recalling my past days, I could not help but notice how every gesture and word of his reminded me that even in the coldest moments of life, there exists a warmth capable of melting the ice within. His account of the time he once lost everything he loved was full of bitterness, yet tinged with a surprising tenderness that warmed my heart. We laughed at the absurdity of fate, at how random encounters can change our lives entirely, and simultaneously I felt each of his words, imbued with wisdom and melancholy, resonate deep within me. It was notable that even as I tried to gather my thoughts, my words sometimes broke into an awkward, sincere laugh that made me feel less alone. For it is precisely in those moments, when it seems the world is falling apart, that a person appears ready to accept you with all your fears and weaknesses. And so, sitting next to Mr. Oliver, I realized that this meeting was not mere chance, but a sign sent by fate. Our conversation flowed seamlessly from discussions about minor everyday troubles to profound reflections on the meaning of life. He recounted how, as a child, he dreamed of becoming a musician, how love and loss left indelible marks on his heart, and how every loss eventually opened up new horizons for him. His voice, sometimes soft and thoughtful, sometimes punctuated with genuine laughter, as if he himself were laughing at fate, made me forget all my worries and fears. I listened to him as if I were listening to an old, beloved melody known since childhood, and in every word I found a piece of solace and support. Over a cup of coffee, time seemed to stand still. In that small world created within the walls of the ancient house, I felt that I could be myself, without masks, without pretense. Here, in the quiet atmosphere where notes of sorrow and humor mingled, I realized for the first time in a long while that perhaps this random encounter was a chance to start anew. Even the rain outside seemed like a playful accompaniment to our conversation, emphasizing the dramatic nature of the moment while underlining its incredible simplicity. Watching the flickering shadows cast by the old furniture, I couldn't help but smile, thinking how wondrously the world is arranged. One moment you are completely alone in a cold city, and the next, a warm stranger's voice invites you in, giving you hope and a belief in something better. Perhaps this was the beginning of something extraordinary, a new chapter in my life, where every detail and every meeting held meaning. At that moment, Mr. Oliver made a small gesture, as if understanding that it was time for a little secret. He invited me to sit on an old, ornately carved armchair beside him, and whispered quietly, "You know, sometimes doors open not only physically, but for the soul as well. What you see now is just the beginning of a long journey, full of surprises and discoveries." Still hardly believing in miracles, I listened to him, and in his eyes I saw glimmers of that very mystery which had immediately captured my heart. Every word he spoke sounded like a promise that ahead of me lay encounters capable of healing even the most wounded parts of the soul. And so, sitting in that cozy corner, I began to understand. One should not be afraid to open oneself to new worlds, even if they seem strange and incomprehensible. For sometimes it is in such places that true miracles are born, a miracle of an encounter that forever changes our lives. As the rain continued to drum against the windows and the old clock quietly marked the passage of time, I allowed myself to forget all my fears and doubts. It seemed to me that in this house, where every detail breathed history, I could find not only shelter from the storm, but also the answers to the questions that had so long troubled my heart. Perhaps Mr. Oliver and his home were exactly the place where I could heal my inner wounds and learn to believe in goodness once more. That night, amidst the sounds of rain and the whispers of ancient walls, I realized that even the most unexpected encounters can mark the beginning of something great. The door through which I entered became a symbol not only of salvation, but also of the start of a journey into a new, uncharted world. A world where every secret and every word held its own significance, and fate, like a delicate thread, connects us with the most wondrous moments of life. Sitting in the dim light of the cozy living room, where the flickering reflections of the fireplace danced and the soft hum of an old record player filled the air, I couldn't shake the feeling that behind the apparent idol lay a whole world of unopened doors and undiscovered secrets. Mr. Oliver, as if inviting me to look beyond the mundane, began his story, a story that was meant to unveil one of the most touching chapters of his life. You know, sometimes the past is not just echoes of bygone days, but a true labyrinth where every path leads to unexpected discoveries, he began, pouring himself another cup of coffee from an antique porcelain teapot that seemed to hold the secrets of many generations. His voice was soft, almost a whisper, yet it carried a strength capable of making time stand still. I looked at him, trying to read the unspoken words in his thoughtful gaze. It seemed as if every wrinkle on his face told its own story of loss, love, and forgiveness. He recalled his childhood spent in a small seaside town, where the sea was not merely a backdrop, but a true teacher of life. It was there, between the roaring waves and endless sandy beaches, that his dream was born, a dream of music that could heal any wound, no matter how deep. With a smile that carried both the bitterness of loss and the warmth of memories, Oliver recounted how, one spring evening at a ball with friends, he first heard the live performance of a street musician. That melody, simple and sincere, made his heart beat faster, awakening in him the desire to create. But the joy of that evening was darkened by an inevitable loss. In the very moment he first tasted true passion for art, fate separated him from a close friend who left forever. I still remember how, listening to those sounds, I understood that every note was a farewell to the past, and at the same time a promise of the future, he said quietly, a tear glistening in his eyes which he quickly tried to hide behind a gentle smile. I couldn't help but laugh softly, recalling one of the first evenings when I had just begun to explore this house, and we tried to cook a traditional Czech soup together, only to end up with a complete culinary farce. Oliver, with his unique sense of humor, joked that even memories of tragedies could be sprinkled with a pinch of absurdity, and in that soft blend of laughter and sorrow, I felt the veil of his past slowly lifting. Mr. Oliver told me about his first love, about the woman whose image had long been etched in his memory. She was like the morning dew in spring, fresh, sincere, and unattainable. His tale was filled with details that seemed torn from old letters, brimming with tenderness and quiet melancholy. Her name was Elena, he said with a trace of nostalgia, and she was like a ray of sunshine on the darkest day. He described how they strolled together through the streets of the old town, laughing at the absurdity of fate and dreaming of a future that seemed as distant as the stars in the night sky. But, as often happens, life had other plans. Elena left, leaving behind only memories. And from then on, Oliver carried a wound that time could not heal. Every detail of his story penetrated me like an old photograph framed in the dust of bygone years. I listened, breath held, immersing myself in those moments when everything seemed possible and every word was living proof of the power of love. He spoke of how, despite the pain of loss, life continued to offer little miracles, unexpected encounters, the fleeting smiles of passers-by, and amusing mishaps in the most ordinary situations. Life, he said with a soft chuckle, can be as absurd as the time when, trying to recreate my grandmother's pie recipe, I ended up setting the kitchen on fire. But it's these moments that teach us to forgive not only others, but also ourselves. With each word he spoke, I increasingly understood that Oliver's past was not a chain of unfulfilled dreams, but a source of strength that could inspire new beginnings. In his narratives shone a sincere gratitude for every moment endured, even if it was tinged with tears. It seemed to me that his voice, filled with mixed emotions, was like an old phonograph playing a melody where sorrow and joy intertwined into a profound, remarkable chord. Sometimes, in the pauses between our exchanges, a silence arose, a silence filled with understanding and a quiet agreement that it is in these very conversations and confessions that new strength is born to continue life's journey. And no matter how painful the memories of loss might be, they still left behind a trace of gratitude for the fact that at one point in life we were able to experience true love, even if only for a fleeting moment. The sounds of the rain outside had now become like a soft echo of a distant past, reminding me that every drop carries stories that, like us, learn to forgive and love anew. Sitting next to Oliver, I realized that even the most painful losses can transform into an invaluable lesson if we learn to accept them with gratitude. His story reminded me that every wound, even though it leaves a scar, ultimately becomes a source of strength for new beginnings. And so, as the evening yielded to night and the warm glow of the fireplace grew even cozier, Mr. Oliver gently asked, "And you, dear, do you believe that the past can heal us, even if it has caused pain?" I pondered, recalling my own experiences, and with a quiet laugh I replied, "I do, because it is through the memories of what was that we learn to value what is and dream of what might be." His eyes lit up with sincerity, and for a moment I saw in them a reflection of my own soul, vulnerable, yet filled with hope for a better future. In that moment, I realized that our conversation was not just an exchange of words, but a true ritual of forgiving the past and embracing the future with an open heart. Thus, in the quiet ambiance of the ancient house, where every little detail seemed imbued with meaning, I witnessed how Oliver's past, so rich in emotion and experience, transformed into a powerful source of inspiration. Every word he spoke, every pause, seemed to confirm that the true strength of the soul lies not in forgetting the pain, but in learning to live with it, finding in every lost moment a chance for a new beginning. When the conversation finally drew to a close, I felt the invisible threads of fate binding our souls together. The secrets of the past, shared with such tenderness and sincerity, made me understand that each of us carries our own secrets, our own wounds, and our own hopes. And perhaps therein lies the true meaning of life, in our ability to accept and forgive, to laugh at the absurdity of fate, and to find light even in the darkest times. I sat there, lost in thought, feeling how every phrase of Mr. Oliver's left an indelible mark on my heart. In his voice, filled with quiet sadness and gentle warmth, I heard an invitation, a call to explore the depths of my own soul, to believe that every trial, no matter how harsh it might seem, opens up new horizons and offers a chance for healing. That night, amid the whisper of the rain and the shimmering glow of the fireplace, I realized the secrets of the past are not a burden, but wings capable of lifting us above the mundane and inspiring us toward future achievements. And though many trials still lie ahead, I felt that with each secret unveiled, with every shared story, my soul grew stronger and my heart became ready to embrace whatever fate had in store for us. In Mr. Oliver's house, the evening fell like a heavy blanket, blending with a gentle sadness and unexpected bursts of laughter. We sat in the living room by the fireplace, where the flickering firelight reflected in Oliver's eyes, as if inviting him to share yet another secret of his fate. But this time, behind the conversations lay not only the past, but also amusing mishaps of the present, from which tears flowed both from joy and from pain. "You know," Oliver began, stroking his beard that seemed to have a life of its own, "there was a time when I thought my soul was so delicate that even a lollipop could move it to tears. And now I understand. The best therapy is coffee and funny stories." I couldn't help but smile, and then, with a note of irony in my voice, I added, "Oh, yes, just like that time when you tried to make oatmeal and ended up with a real experiment in sculpting clay instead of porridge." Oliver burst out laughing, leaning back in his antique armchair, and said, "Ah, that porridge you speak of. Imagine I myself couldn't believe that one could turn oatmeal into something resembling, let's say, a piece of abstract art. But you know, sometimes miracles are born from failures." I still remember how, after that incident, my cat, Mari, decided that the kitchen was now her personal art exhibition hall. At that moment, the doorbell rang, and Oliver got up, saying, "Hold on, maybe fate has decided to test how we handle another surprise." I looked at him with a smile, and he, like a true master of improvisation, continued, "And if it seems that a crowd of curious guests is gathering at our home, I'm always ready to share another anecdote from my youth. Do you remember how I once tried to persuade my grandmother to buy me a motorcycle, and instead I got, let's say, a lesson in humility and patience? The doorbell continued to chime, and I winked at Oliver before saying, "Well then, maybe it really is fate. If you can turn oatmeal into a masterpiece and your grandmother into a wall of silence, then welcome your guest with the same heartfelt openness." Oliver opened the door, and on the threshold stood a young man with a slight uncertainty in his voice. "Excuse me for the intrusion. I got lost in this labyrinth of Prague streets. May I ask for a cup of tea?" "Now that's something," Oliver exclaimed, and without missing a beat, added with a smile, "Tea? Of course. Here, tea is brewed not just any way, but with a blend of stories and drops of humor. Come on in, don't be shy." I watched as a real comedy unfolded in the room. The young guest, who seemed as if he had just stepped off the path of a lost soul, sat next to us, listening intently to Oliver's tales. The conversation seamlessly shifted from awkward moments of past failures to heartfelt confessions, and somewhere between the words we all cried together, tears of joy, of pain, and of the realization that life never ceases to amaze, even in its saddest moments. "You know," the young guest said softly when Oliver finished recounting the story of his first failed attempt to persuade his grandmother to buy him a motorcycle, "your stories are so helpful. Sometimes I feel that all my problems boil down to one thing. I overthink too much. Maybe I should learn to laugh at myself the way you do." Oliver looked at him with gentle humor and said, "My dear, if you can laugh at yourself, then you've already half won in this game called life. Honestly, I often cry too, but from laughter when I remember the time I forgot that I even had a cat and tried to feed a cactus." The three of us laughed together, and in that moment I felt how tears of joy mingled with memories of pain. It was that very moment when each of us understood that the true strength of the soul lies in the ability to find light, even in the darkest moments. "You know," I said, looking at Oliver, "I always thought tears were only from pain, but today I realized they can also come from happiness. A funny kind of happiness, when your life seems like such a kaleidoscope of absurdity, where even the saddest moments turn into an opportunity for laughter." Oliver nodded, as if agreeing with every word, and added, "Yes, dear, life isn't just tragedy. It's the most amazing comedy. After all, sometimes we're so afraid to cry that we forget tears are also a way to express gratitude for the moments we've lived." We exchanged looks filled with mutual understanding and warmth. The young guest, clearly moved by the sincerity of our conversation, whispered quietly, "Sometimes I think that if all of us could share moments like these, the world would be so much kinder. Your stories are like medicine for the soul, only in the form of funny and touching tales." Oliver, as always, didn't miss an opportunity to add another humorous remark. "Well, if my stories can heal even one person, I'm ready to tell them again and again, even if it means brewing another batch of porridge. Because every failed experiment turns into a real masterpiece when you look at it from the right angle." At that moment, I felt the room fill with a special light, a light of friendship, mutual understanding, and genuine humanity. We sat together, sharing our stories as if each of our words were a tiny piece of a vast mosaic in which pain and joy intertwined as naturally as morning coffee and fresh bread. And then, after a few minutes, when the rain outside subsided and the fireplace continued to sprinkle its flickering light, I quietly said, "Thank you both. For today I understood that tears aren't just a sign of sorrow, but also evidence that we can feel, laugh, and live." The young guest nodded, and Oliver, with a sparkle in his eyes, said, "Exactly, dear. If each of us could learn to laugh at our own misfortunes, life would be so much easier. And if we must cry, then let the tears be of joy, not of grief." We all fell into a gentle silence filled with understanding and tender melancholy, filling our hearts with warmth. In that moment, I realized how deeply our lives could be both moving and amusing, as if fate itself had decided to show us that even the most painful losses can be adorned with sincere laughter. Thus, on that evening, when every raindrop outside seemed to reflect our feelings, we learned together to cherish each moment, from tears to laughter, from pain to joy. And I understood that this is the true meaning of life, the ability to accept it with all its contradictions, to find humor even in the most tragic situations, and to share that light with those around us. The morning in Mr. Oliver's old house was as gentle and a little sleepy as our memories of the nighttime conversations by the fireplace. Over a cup of strong coffee that Oliver masterfully brewed according to his secret recipes, probably with a touch of absurdity and a hint of magic, we gathered once again in the living room to talk about what had long remained unsaid, about forgiveness. The young guest, who had by now introduced himself as our mutual friend, was the first to break the silence. "You know, sometimes I think that my life is like an old jacket, full of holes, yet every stitch tells a story that cannot just be thrown away." Oliver laughed, patting him on the shoulder. "Exactly. Our holes aren't flaws, but marks of the journey of life. I, for example, still remember how once, in a burst of courage, I decided to forgive an old acquaintance who hurt me so deeply that it left a spot on my heart for a new hole. Forgiveness is like our favorite tea. At first, it's a bit bitter, but if brewed correctly, it becomes incredibly warming." I smiled softly, watching their effortless dialogue. At that moment, Oliver continued, "Let's be honest, sometimes forgiving yourself is even harder than forgiving someone else. As I would say, if my life were a cooking show, I would have burned the recipes for happiness more than once. But it is exactly from these scorched dishes that the most delicious and genuine moments are born," the young guest added with a light irony. "Exactly, Oliver. If I had to choose between eternal regret and laughing at my mistakes, I would choose laughter. Because even when the heart hurts, it knows how to rejoice in the little things, whether it's an unexpected phone call, a cup of tea, or even a sock you accidentally find after searching for it all day." I sighed deeply, realizing how wise and yet amusing their words sounded. I remembered how, after a long period of sadness, I learned to laugh at myself when, in a rush, I staged a culinary experiment instead of preparing a proper lunch. Such moments, it seemed, erase the boundaries between pain and joy, helping one to see light in the darkest corners of the soul. Oliver looked at me and said with a slight wink, "My dear, forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It means learning to live with what has been, like with a beloved, albeit slightly worn, garment. Imagine, you take an old coat that once cost a fortune, and now it reminds you of all the storms you have weathered. It has become your armor, not a burden." I smiled in response. "Yes. And it's thanks to these stitches in my life that I know every wound leaves not only a scar but also a new opportunity. An opportunity to learn to love, to forgive, and, most importantly, to laugh at oneself." At that moment, Oliver entered the room with a new surprise, a vintage picture frame containing a photo of his youth, when he, in a rather clumsy manner, tried to sing at a family celebration. He examined the photo, then said with a smirk, "Look, there I am back then, with a guitar in hand, trying to share with everyone the melody of life. No one laughed quite as hard as I laughed at myself. And it is precisely in the ability to laugh at one's failures that true forgiveness is hidden." The young guest chimed in, "That's for sure. If our mistakes were musical chords, life would sound like a joyful symphony, where every note, even an off-key one, has its place in the melody. We all laughed, and at that moment I felt the weight of the past, accumulated over years of pain, seemingly dissolve in this warm family circle. The sounds of the morning city outside the window, the raindrops softly tapping the glass, and the gentle laughter, all merged into one, offering hope for a new life where forgiveness becomes not an obligation but a joyful choice. I said quietly, looking at Oliver. You know, I always believed that forgiveness is something grand and unattainable, but today I understand. To forgive means to accept the entire palette of life with its bright colors and imperfect shades. That is the magic. Even if our hearts still bear the traces of old hurts, they can become a source of strength and inspiration. Oliver nodded, adding with gentle irony, So, my dear, every scar is not a sign of defeat, but a medal for having weathered the storm. And if we must cry, let the tears be not of pain, but of laughter at how absurdly life is arranged. The young guest, raising his eyebrows, exclaimed, Perhaps we should throw a forgiveness party, where everyone brings their own story, and together we laugh at the past, for it no longer holds us captive. We laughed at this idea, and in that moment I felt my soul fill with an incredible lightness. Here, in this old house where every crack in the walls told its own story, we were learning to forgive not only others but ourselves, accepting life as it is, full of joy, sorrow, laughter, and tears. As the morning unfolded outside, we continued our candid conversations, and I realized that our path of forgiveness is not a final destination, but an endless journey in which every moment is precious. After all, as Oliver said, life is an amazing canvas where every mistake turns into a brushstroke that makes the picture unique. And so, sitting in this cozy atmosphere, I felt that forgiveness is not just a word, but a way of living, a way that allows us to find harmony and joy. Our conversations, filled with sincere laughter and subtle hints of sadness, became a true ritual of cleansing, granting us freedom from the past and hope for the future. The morning after a long night of sincere conversations, laughter, and tears turned out to be surprisingly fresh and full of promise. I awoke to the sound of a gentle rain, which had become a soft whisper behind the windows of the old house. The fireplace still burned warmly, its soft glow holding the reflections of our memories. In that moment I felt that time, as well as life, moves forward, and it was time to begin a new chapter. In the kitchen, Oliver was already preparing breakfast, and the aroma of freshly baked buns mixed with the subtle scent of coffee. At the table, I noticed our young guest, now our mutual friend, watching the process with interest, as if trying to uncover the secrets of the old recipes, where even a small mistake turns into a delightful surprise. You know, he began with a slight smirk, Sometimes I think that Oliver's house is like a true museum of failed culinary experiments. After all, if you don't experiment, how else can you discover that even buns can be a little unconventional? Taking his usual seat at the table, Oliver lifted his mug and added, Ah, my dear, each bun is like a little life, slightly burnt on one side with a kind, crispy edge on the other, and always holding a surprise inside. As I always say, saying goodbye to the past should start with a smile and, of course, a delicious breakfast. I couldn't help but laugh, and at that moment Oliver turned to me and said, Darling, are you ready for new beginnings? Because bidding farewell to the past is just the first step toward welcoming life with renewed strength. I promise you, ahead of us lie not only adventures but also countless quirks that will make even the gravest problems seem funny. Sitting at the table, we discussed our plans for the day. The young guest suggested taking a short walk through the narrow streets of Prague to discover the uncharted corners of the city where history meets modernity, and even the old stone pavements can tell their unique story. Feeling a gentle thrill and joy, I agreed, for the feeling that the past no longer held me captive gave me confidence in every step. Imagine, he said with a smile, if our lives were a movie, we'd already be sitting in the theater, laughing at the absurd scenes from our past that once seemed tragic. And now we can write a script with a new, happy ending. Always ready to join in, Oliver exclaimed. Exactly. Life isn't a script written by someone else. It's our own creation. And I'm sure that every new chapter should be filled with joy, laughter, and, of course, adventures that make the heart beat faster. We stepped outside, and the rain seemed to cease being an obstacle, becoming instead a gentle accompaniment to our steps. The old streets of Prague, adorned with bright stained glass windows and narrow alleys, welcomed us with warmth and unexpected smiles from passers-by. Every corner of the city reminded us that time goes on and that life is always ready to deliver surprises, from minor mishaps to unforgettable moments of happiness. Look, remarked the young guest, pointing to an antique shop, here. You might not only find forgotten stories, but maybe even new recipes for your buns, Oliver. With a knowing smile, Oliver replied, and if not a recipe, then at least a story that can be shared later over a cup of tea. After all, every little thing, every well-worn book, is like an old coat. With time, it only becomes more valuable, and every crack reminds us that life was lived for a reason. I felt a sense of renewal rising within me, as if yesterday's tears and laughter had dissolved in the morning light, leaving behind a clear sky for new dreams. Forgiveness of the past, laughing at mistakes, the warm words of friends. All of these were transforming into a guiding star, leading toward a fresh beginning. The walk continued, and our conversations grew livelier. We discussed plans, dreamed about the future, laughed over amusing coincidences, and found joy even in the simplest moments. Someone remarked on how small moments, a surprise phone call, a chance encounter with an old newspaper bearing ancient news, or even the peculiar smell of fresh bread, can become the start of a new chapter. Noticing the sun beginning to break through the clouds, Oliver softly said, "See, even the weather has decided it's time to say goodbye to the rain and bring us new hopes. Let this day be a symbol that new beginnings come when we least expect them, and that in that very moment everything becomes possible." We paused by a small bridge where I reflected and said, I feel that deep down each of us dreams of a second chance, that the past might cease to be a burden and become merely a lesson we can transform into inspiration for the future. The young guest chimed in, and may our stories be like little legends told with a smile, for even if the past has left scars, it has also given us the wisdom and strength to laugh at ourselves. At that moment, laughter and warm words filled the space around us, like music that sweeps away all doubts. I felt that our journey continued, and each step forward was proof that life is capable of surprising, healing, and offering new beginnings, if only we allow it. And so, beneath the light of the emerging sun and the sounds of the waking city, I understood. Forgiveness and new beginnings are not the end of a story, but its brightest continuation. Together we learn to embrace life with all its surprises, to laugh at our misfortunes, and to move forward knowing that each new chapter is a gift to be cherished. The morning turned out bright and invigorating, as if fate itself had decided to play along with our heroes. After yesterday's walk through the streets of Prague, filled with laughter, gentle sadness, and dreams of the future, Oliver's house was bathed in a pleasant tranquility. At the table, where yesterday's conversations had dissolved into the warm rays of the new day, we gathered once again to hear what fate had prepared. The young guest, now simply called Tom, was the first to break the morning silence. You know, sometimes I feel that fate is like a strange conductor who sets us up with unexpected movements. Today, for instance, it decided that our concert should begin with a cheerful intermission number. Oliver, with a mischievous grin, added, "Intermission, you say? Then I propose we hold an impromptu concert in the kitchen. After all, every new encounter is like a new chord in the symphony of life. Just imagine, me with a spoon instead of a microphone, and Tom trying to persuade me to play the hit, Love Will Save the World. It wouldn't sound any worse than our morning conversations. I laughed, and looking at both of them, I said, "Oh, you two have such a way of turning any morning into a celebration. It seems even the coffee today smells of merriment and hope for something better." At that moment, Oliver rose and approached the antique piano standing in the corner of the living room, as if it were a treasure from the past discovered by chance. He gently touched the keys and, with a slight clumsiness, said, "Well, perhaps this is my first attempt. I haven't played in ages, and the keys seem to be waiting for someone to gift them the sounds of laughter and joy once again." Tom, with a teasing tone, added, "If this melody doesn't sound perfect, it only adds to its charm, because even if the notes scatter like the buns from previous experiments, the most important thing is the sincerity of the performance." Oliver laughed. "Well then, if my fingers decide to play something unexpected, let's consider it a surprise from fate. After all, sometimes even a wrong melody can bring hope and joy." Outside in Prague, as if echoing our conversation, the morning symphony of the streets began to play. The ringing of tram bells, the whispers of passers-by, and the soft tapping of raindrops that remained in the memories of last night's downpour. Every little detail seemed to invite us to move forward, to learn to see in every chance encounter an invitation to a new story. Watching this small theater of life, I quietly remarked, "Sometimes I feel that we create the music of our destiny ourselves. And even if the melody turns out strange, like an attempt to play a favorite hit without any rehearsals, it is still unique and full of meaning." Tom, thoughtfully shaking his head, added, "Exactly. Every mistake of ours is like a note that adds its own special tint to the overall sound. And if we learn to laugh at those notes, we can create the most beautiful symphony imaginable." Oliver, approaching the piano once again with a light smirk, declared, "All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue our morning show. Today I will perform my version of the hit, Laughter and Tears, because it is in that very mix that I find the strength to live." Laughing, I joined in. "And I promise that even if the melody sounds absurd, it will become an anthem for our new beginnings and encounters. After all, laughter is the very rhythm to which the heart beats for anyone who isn't afraid to open up to fate." In that moment, our voices merged in a warm harmony, and even the old furniture, as if brought to life by our genuine emotions, softly danced to the sounds of laughter and music. We understood that life, with all its unexpected turns, had given us something more than just a morning in an old house. It had given us the opportunity to believe in miracles again, and to see that each new day is a chance to write a new chapter in our shared story. And so, under the ringing of piano keys and joyful laughter, fate continued its game, inviting us to listen, create, and rejoice in every moment. We realized that, despite all the challenges, there would always be room in our hearts for music, laughter, and new rhythms capable of lighting up even the cloudiest of days. It was already late in the evening. In the old house where we had experienced so many sincere confessions, laughter, and tears, silence once again enveloped every room, as if inviting us to reflect on the path we had traveled. I sat by the window, watching as the slumbering city of Prague twinkled with lights, and the rain, having seemingly yielded to the stars, barely whispered its final secrets. Oliver approached me, holding a small keepsake box that he seemed to have cherished all his life. He sat down beside me and quietly said, "You know, my dear, when I first met you on that rainy evening, I had no idea that our encounter would become the beginning of an entire symphony of emotions. Every meeting, every chance occurrence, It's all like notes coming together to form a melody I will never forget. I smiled, recalling all our shared moments, from the amusing culinary experiments to the long conversations about pain and forgiveness that had become our quiet ritual. At that moment, Tom, our young friend, entered the room carrying a couple of freshly baked buns that Oliver had recently celebrated with his new recipe. "Well, my friends," he said with a gentle laugh, "even the buns today speak of a new chapter. For in every crust, just like in our lives, there is a little secret of happiness." We all laughed, and Oliver, taking a bun in his hand, added, "It seems that fate has decided to give us the final chord of this eternal symphony. A bun, coffee, laughter, and memories. These are the ingredients from which our lives are composed." I looked at them, and a warm wave of gratitude filled my heart. I remembered how, starting from that very first rainy evening, I had learned to accept every little thing, every unexpected twist of fate, even if they brought both pain and joy. "Friends," I said softly, "I realize that every story, no matter what it is, leaves a mark. Our paths have intertwined, and although this evening may mark the end of one chapter, I believe that new meetings, new adventures, and of course new notes in this marvelous melody of life await us." Oliver smiled, his eyes sparkling with sincere understanding. "Yes, farewell is not the end. It is like a pause in your favorite melody, where you understand that every note is important, and every silence makes room for the next sound. Let our stories continue. Let our hearts remain open to new miracles." Tom chimed in. "And even if there are falls and awkward moments ahead, we will always be able to laugh at them, just as we are today, for it is laughter that helps us hold on to hope and move forward." I felt how every spark in this little gathering warmed my heart. We recalled all our experiences, all our tears, and laughing admitted that every minute is a gift to be grateful for. In the warm light of the lamp reflected in the eyes of our friends, I understood that the most important thing is to accept life with all its colors, even if they sometimes seem absurd. As the nighttime lights of Prague flickered outside like silent witnesses of eternity, I softly said, "Thank you for being by my side, for every funny moment, for every story, for every drop of tears and laughter. May our paths continue, and may this house always be a place where one can find solace, joy, and, of course, the belief that every new day is yet another opportunity to be happy." Oliver, Tom, and I sat together for a long while, discussing our dreams, plans, and even the absurd incidents of the past, each burst of laughter lighting up the darkness and bringing forth light. We understood that our story does not end this night, but rather transitions into another chapter, where farewell transforms into a promise of new meetings, where every chord of fate becomes the beginning of a new symphony. The night slowly yielded to the dawn, and somewhere in the distance the first voice of the new day could be heard. Like true friends, we embraced and, with a gentle melancholy mixed with even greater joy, said goodbye to this story that would forever remain in our hearts. Fate, as always, had left us the keys to the future, and I knew that wherever our paths might lead, we would remember laughter through tears, pain mixed with joy, and the endless ability to forgive. These are what make us truly alive. Thank you for listening to this story until the end. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you don't miss new spine-chilling stories. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and share this video with your friends. More eerie and incredible stories are coming soon. The next story is just around the corner. Are you ready to discover what lurks in the darkness?